Upon arriving in the village, there was no need for me to ask where the baker lived. Our noses guided us straight to the shop. My sense of smell was now as keen as that of my dogs. From the distance I sniffed the delicious odor of hot bread. We could not get much for 3 sous, when it cost 5 sous a pound. Each of us had but a little piece, so our breakfast was soon over. We had to make money that day. I walked through the village to find a favorable place for a performance, and also to note the expressions of the people, to try and guess if they were enemies or friends. My intention was not to give the performance at once. It was too early, but after finding a place we would come back in the middle of the day and take a chance. I was engrossed with this idea, when suddenly I heard someone shouting behind me. I turned round quickly and saw Zerbino racing towards me, followed by an old woman. It did not take me long to know what was the matter. Profiting by my preoccupation, Zerbino had run into a house and stolen a piece of meat. He was racing alone, carrying his booty in his jaws. "Thief! Thief!" cried the old woman. "Catch him! Catch all of 'em!" When I heard her say this, I felt that somehow I was guilty, or at least, that I was responsible for Zerbino's crime, so I began to run. What could I say to the old woman if she demanded the price of the stolen meat? How could I pay her? If we were arrested, they would put us in prison. Seeing me flying down the road, Dulcie and Capi were not long following my example. They were at my heels, while Pretty Heart, whom I carried on my shoulder, clung around my neck so as not to fall. Someone else cried, "Stop, thief!" and others joined in the chase. But we raced on. Fear gave us speed. I never saw Dulcie run so fast, her feet barely touched the ground. Down a side street and across a field we went, and soon we had outstripped our pursuers, but I did not stop running until I was quite out of breath. We had raced at least 2 miles. I turned round. No one was following us. Capi and Dulcie were still at my heels. Zerbino was in the distance. He had stopped probably to eat his piece of meat. I called him, but he knew very well that he deserved a severe punishment, so instead of coming to me, he ran away as fast as he could. He was famished, that was why he had stolen the meat. But I could not accept this as an excuse. He had stolen. If I wanted to preserve discipline in my troop, the guilty one must be punished. If not, in the next village Dulcie would do the same, and then Capi would succumb to the temptation. I should have to punish Zerbino publicly. But in order to do that I should have to catch him, and that was not an easy thing to do. I turned to Capi. "Go and find Zerbino," I said gravely. He started off at once to do what I told him, but it seemed to me that he went with less ardor than usual. From the look that he gave me, I saw that he would far rather champion Zerbino than be my envoy. I sat down to await his return with the prisoner. I was pleased to get a rest after our mad race. When we stopped running, we had reached the bank of a canal with shady trees and fields on either side. An hour passed. The dogs had not returned. I was beginning to feel anxious when at last Capi appeared alone, his head hanging down. "Where is Zerbino?" Capi laid down in a cowed attitude. I looked at him and noticed that one of his ears was bleeding. I knew what had happened. Zerbino had put up a fight. I felt that, although Capi had obeyed my orders, he had considered that I was too severe and had let himself be beaten. I could not scold him. I could only wait until Zerbino chose to return. I knew that sooner or later he would feel sorry and would come back and take his punishment. I stretched myself out under a tree, holding Pretty Heart tight for fear he should take it into his head to join Zerbino. Dulcie and Capi slept at my feet. Time passed. Zerbino did not appear. At last I also dropped off to sleep. Several hours had passed when I awoke. By the sun I could tell that it was getting late, but there was no need for the sun to tell me that. My stomach cried out that it was a long time since I had eaten that piece of bread. And I could tell from the looks of the 2 dogs and Pretty Heart that they were famished. Capi and Dulcie fixed their eyes on me piteously. Pretty Heart made grimaces. But still Zerbino had not come back. I called to him, I whistled, but in vain. Having well lunched, he was probably digesting his meal, cuddled up in a bush. The situation was becoming serious. If I left this spot, Zerbino perhaps would get lost, for he might not be able to find us. Then if I stayed, there was no chance of me making a little money to buy something to eat. Our hunger became more acute. The dogs fixed their eyes on me imploringly, and Pretty Heart rubbed his stomach and squealed angrily. Still Zerbino did not return. Once more I sent Capi to look for the truant, but at the end of half an hour he came back alone. What was to be done? Although Zerbino was guilty, and through his fault we were put into this terrible position, I could not forsake him. What would my master say if I did not take his 3 dogs back to him? And then, in spite of all, I loved Zerbino, the rogue. I decided to wait until evening, but it was impossible to remain inactive. If we were doing something I thought we might not feel the pangs of hunger so keenly. If I could invent something to distract us, we might, for the time being, forget that we were so famished. What could we do? I pondered over the question. Then I remembered that Vitalis had told me that when a regiment was tired out by a long march, the band played the gayest air so that the soldiers should forget their fatigue. If I played some gay pieces on my harp, perhaps we could forget our hunger. We were all so faint and sick, yet if I played something lively and made the 2 poor dogs dance with Pretty Heart the time might pass quicker. I took my instrument, which I had placed up against a tree and, turning my back to the canal, I put my animals in position and began to play a dance. At first neither the dogs nor the monkey seemed disposed to dance. All they wanted was food. My heart ached as I watched their pitiful attitude. But they must forget their hunger, poor little things. I played louder and quicker, then, little by little, the music produced its customary effect. They danced and I played on and on. Suddenly I heard a clear voice, a child's voice, call out, "Bravo!" The voice came from behind me. I turned round quickly. A barge had stopped on the canal. The 2 horses which dragged the boat were standing on the opposite bank. It was a strange barge. I had never seen one like it. It was much shorter than the other boats on the canal, and the deck was fashioned like a beautiful veranda, covered with plants and foliage. I could see 2 people, a lady, who was still young, with a beautiful sad face, and a boy about my own age, who seemed to be lying down. It was evidently the little boy who had called out "Bravo." I was very surprised at seeing them. I lifted my hat to thank them for their applause. "Are you playing for your own pleasure?" asked the lady, speaking French with a foreign accent. "I am keeping the dogs in practice and also, it diverts their attention." The child said something. The lady bent over him. "Will you play again?" she then asked, turning round to me. Would I play? Play for an audience who had arrived at such a moment. I did not wait to be asked twice. "Would you like a dance or a little comedy?" I asked. "Oh, a comedy," cried the child. But the lady said she preferred a dance. "A dance is too short," said the boy. "If the distinguished audience wishes, after the dance, we will perform our different roles." This was one of my master's fine phrases. I tried to say it in the same grand manner as he. Upon second thought, I was not sorry that the lady did not wish for a comedy, for I don't see how I could have given a performance. Not only was Zerbino absent, but I had none of the stage fittings with me. I played the first bars of a waltz. Capi took Dulcie by the waist with his 2 paws and they whirled round, keeping good time. Then Pretty Heart danced alone. Successively, we went through all our repertoire. We did not feel tired now. The poor little creatures knew that they would be repaid with a meal and they did their best. I also. Then, suddenly, in the midst of a dance in which all were taking part, Zerbino came out from behind a bush, and as Capi and Dulcie and Pretty Heart passed near him, he boldly took his place amongst them. While playing and watching my actors, I glanced from time to time at the little boy. He seemed to take great pleasure in what we were doing, but he did not move. He looked as though he was lying on a stretcher. The boat had drifted right to the edge of the bank, and now I could see the boy plainly. He had fair hair. His face was pale, so white that one could see the blue veins on his forehead. He had the drawn face of a sick child. "How much do you charge for seats at your performance?" asked the lady. "You pay according to the pleasure we have given you." "Then, Mama, you must pay a lot," said the child. He added something in a language that I did not understand. "My son would like to see your actors nearer." I made a sign to Capi. With delight, he sprang onto the boat. "And the others," cried the little boy. Zerbino and Dulcie followed Capi's example. "And the monkey." Pretty Heart could have easily made the jump, but I was never sure of him. Once on board he might do some tricks that certainly would not be to the lady's taste. "Is he spiteful?" she asked. "No, madam, but he is not always obedient, and I am afraid that he will not behave himself." "Well, bring him on yourself." She signed to a man who stood near the rail. He came forward and threw a plank across to the bank. With my harp on my shoulder and Pretty Heart in my arms, I stepped up the plank. "The monkey! The monkey!" cried the little boy, whom the lady addressed as Arthur. I went up to him and, while he stroked and petted Pretty Heart, I watched him. He was strapped to a board. "Have you a father, my child?" asked the lady. "Yes, but I am alone just now." "For long?" "For 2 months." 2 months. Oh, poor little boy. At your age, how is it that you happen to be left all alone? "It has to be, madam." "Does your father make you take him a sum of money at the end of 2 months? Is that it?" "No, madam, he does not force me to do anything. If I can make enough to live with my animals, that is all." "And do you manage to get enough?" I hesitated before replying. I felt a kind of awe, a reverence for this beautiful lady. Yet she talked to me so kindly and her voice was so sweet, that I decided to tell her the truth. There was no reason why I should not. Then I told her how Vitalis and I had been parted, that he had gone to prison because he had defended me, and how since he had gone I had been unable to make any money. While I was talking, Arthur was playing with the dogs, but he was listening to what I said. "Then how hungry you all must be," he cried. At this word, which the animals well knew, the dogs began to bark and Pretty Heart rubbed his stomach vigorously. "Oh, Mama," cried Arthur. The lady said a few words in a strange language to a woman, whose head I could see through a half-open door. Almost immediately the woman appeared with some food. "Sit down, my child," said the lady. I did so at once. Putting my harp aside, I quickly sat down in the chair at the table. The dogs grouped themselves around me. Pretty Heart jumped on my knee. "Do your dogs eat bread?" asked Arthur. "Do they eat bread?" I gave them a piece which they devoured ravenously. "And the monkey?" said Arthur. But there was no occasion to worry about Pretty Heart, for while I was serving the dogs he had taken a piece of crust from a meat pie and was almost choking himself underneath the table. I helped myself to the pie and, if I did not choke like Pretty Heart, I gobbled it up no less gluttonously than he. "Poor, poor child," said the lady. Arthur said nothing, but he looked at us with wide-open eyes, certainly amazed at our appetites, for we were all as famished as one another, even Zerbino, who should have been somewhat appeased by the meat that he had stolen. "What would you have eaten tonight if you had not met us?" asked Arthur. "I don't think we should have eaten at all." "And tomorrow?" "Perhaps tomorrow we should have had the luck to meet someone like we have today." Arthur then turned to his mother. For some minutes they spoke together in a foreign language. He seemed to be asking for something which at first she seemed not quite willing to grant. Then, suddenly, the boy turned his head. His body did not move. "Would you like to stay with us?" he asked. I looked at him without replying, I was so taken back by the question. "My son wants to know if you would like to stay with us?" repeated the lady. "On this boat?" "Yes, my little boy is ill and he's obliged to be strapped to this board. So that the days will pass more pleasantly for him, I take him about in this boat. While your master is in prison, if you like, you may stay here with us. Your dogs and your monkey can give a performance every day, and Arthur and I will be the audience. You can play your harp for us. You will be doing us a service and we, on our side, may be useful to you. To live on a boat. What a kind lady." I did not know what to say. I took her hand and kissed it. "Poor little boy," she said, almost tenderly. She had said she would like me to play my harp, this simple pleasure I would give her at once. I wanted to show how grateful I was. I took my instrument and, going to the end of the boat, I commenced to play softly. The lady put a little silver whistle to her lips and blew it. I stopped playing, wondering why she had whistled. Was it to tell me that I was playing badly, or to ask me to stop? Arthur, who saw everything that passed round him, noticed my uneasiness. "My mamma blew the whistle for the horses to go on," he said. That was so, The barge, towed by the horses, glided over the soft waters which lapped gently against the keel. On either side were trees and behind us fell the oblique rays from the setting sun. "Will you play?" asked Arthur. He beckoned to his mother. She sat down beside him. He took her hand and kept it in his, and I played to them all the pieces that my master had taught me.